Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. It's your host, Matt Zahab. We are buzzing as always. And today I'm super pumped to have one of the creators from a Web3 game that is absolutely popping off right now. We have David Johansson, the CEO, co-founder, and creative director of the one and only BLOCKLORDS, and he's coming in hot from one of the best cities in the whole world, not up for discussion, and that is Stockholm, Sweden. Incredible vibes, incredible food, incredible, beautiful ladies as well, if that's your cup of tea. Good looking lads too, good hockey players, just great people. They got it all. Time for the intro. David is the CEO, co-founder, and creative director of BLOCKLORDS, and is also the CEO and co-founder of Seascape Network, Metaking Studios, which is the parent companies behind the one and only BLOCKLORDS. He is a passionate gamer and industry veteran and has held numerous creative and production roles on some of the most successful products in their fields, including Crusader Kings, Liberators, and League of Angels, before turning his focus towards building out BLOCKLORDS in 2018. He never looked back. BLOCKLORDS is out. They just had a fat airdrop and they are firing on all cylinders. Can't wait to get into this one. David, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing?
Thank you, Matt. I'm great. It's another day in crypto. Bitcoin just passed 50K. Our game's out. There's lots of Web3 games coming. So the industry that, we've been a part of building is really coming together. And times are good. That's all I can say.
I love it. You have held some pretty big and cushy positions at some really powerful games in the past. You and I were shooting the shit before the show. You're an avid gamer. Literally, let's jump right into BLOCKLORDS. Why wouldn't we? Why did you and the team decide to make this? And my question, and my apologies if I didn't do enough research for this, but was BLOCKLORDS always supposed to be a Web3 game? Because building this in 2018, there were really no Web3 games way back in 2018. What happened there? Give me the whole TLDR, as many stories as you could add. We would absolutely love that. Big fans of stories on the Crypto News Pod. But why did you and the team decide to start BLOCKLORDS? And was the focus always to go the Web3 route?
Yeah, I'll give you the short answer first, and it is yes. BLOCKLORDS was always a Web3 game, and I think there's more and more of them coming out now, but definitely not that many that have been around since 2018. I think it's us, Axie, probably a few more, but I've seen many games come and go, and so that's one of our strengths as a team is we've stood the test of time. We've survived 2 bear markets, but yes, BLOCKLORDS has always been a Web3 game, and for us, the pitch has always been, this is the first, MMO strategy game that's designed entirely around Web3. So that's the short answer to your question, and I'll go a bit deeper into the longer answer of why. Because for me, really, it's everything in my career has led to creating the IP and franchise that is BLOCKLORDS. I've always been a strategy gamer myself. I think some of the first games that I really ground. Is that the right term? Grinded. Grinded, yeah. We're the Command and Conquer series, right? So Red Alert, Tiberian Sun, the original Command and Conquer. I really spent a lot of time playing those games, and these were some of the the first RTS games. Not the first, but definitely very early in taking RTS to the mainstream. And I was there for that. I was like 9-10 years old there then. So definitely that was a big early part of my gaming childhood. Obviously, it wasn't the first games I played. I think my dad got me a Nintendo, the NES, when I was 5 or 6. So those were actually the first games that I really got into. Mario, Duck Hunt, all of those beautiful games. But yeah, so if you go back to my childhood, like gaming was a huge part of it, and it started with the Nintendo games. Went over into strategy games. When I was a teenager, I was more into console games. I liked the FPS games like GoldenEye and not so much Counter-Strike. Everyone in Sweden was playing Counter-Strike, but I didn't. It wasn't my vibe too much.
Same. But the graphics with Counter-Strike, I could never do it. It just seemed too weird, Like you're rolling around, you're turning your person. I don't know. It's just it never fit with me.
I love the vibe of it. I always loved Counter-Strike, the vibe, because I would go to these internet cafes at times, because this was just starting out in Sweden then. There weren't that many cafes around, but there was one in Gothenburg where I grew up, and they had they were playing Counter-Strike, and I was just so struck by the concept where like terrorists, counter-terrorists, and you're running around into the desert. It looked so cool. But then I started playing it, and I was just getting hammered all the time. Like, those kids were not playing around, and just getting a lawn game going and then just getting crushed for hours. I was just not into it. So I prefer my strategy games. They were single player. I would sit in my little cave and like, conquer the world. That was more of my vibe. And definitely when I was 14, I think it might have been 15, I played my first Total War game, and that was Medieval Total War. And that really changed things, because that was the first game where I was like, oh, holy crap! I'm conquering the world. I'm a king of this place, and I can be the French kingdom, or I can be the Spanish kingdom, or I can even be the Swedish kingdom. And it was just so epic, and I really fell in love with that game. And I was also playing a lot of sports games when I was a teenager, so I was really into that. I was into Madden. I played American football myself. We do have a football team in Sweden. It's not huge, but I was into it. I was never good on skates, so hockey was never my thing, but the football was pretty close to it. But yeah, long story short, never thought about a gaming career. Was more into, I'd say, finance and social stuff when I was in high school. But then I got into filmmaking and ended up going to school for university in the US for filmmaking. So I went to San Diego State University, which had a really good film program. And after that, I moved to Hollywood. So I spent quite a lot of time working in film, and started my career with production houses as a screen, what does you call it? Development reader, I think. A screen reader, or whatever you call it. So I was reading scripts basically. So every day I would get 3 to 5 different scripts. I would read through them. I would write up summaries. This is before ChatGPT, so you actually have to write stuff. I think that job is very different now. You just feed in the script, and who knows what's going on there. But I learned a lot about storytelling, learned a lot about narrative, worked my way up to becoming an assistant. So I worked for this really cool producer called Johansson in LA. And I was essentially helping projects get packaged, right? So, and that was a really interesting part that's helped my career a lot, which is, okay, you have a cool idea, now what? Well, you got to get a director attached. You got to get these stars attached. You got to get financing. You got to go to the foreign markets and finance the project that way. And I don't know how familiar you are with film financing, but I'd say it's pretty close to crypto financing in terms of creativity. There's a lot of different ways to actually get the funding for your project. So I learned a lot about that and really loved it. Loved LA, loved the film industry, but ended up having to leave because of my visa was running out, because I was a student, right? I was a foreigner. Almost got married for the visa, but thankfully I didn't. And I ended up in China, which is probably another, life-changing event for me. Because in China, I got into the game industry, right? So I started in film, and I worked for about a year in filmmaking, more in commercial production than in narrative. But basically, I got a job in gaming, and I fell in love with it. And kind of that love of gaming that I'd had growing up, that I'd put on the side during my college years and my Hollywood years, kind of came right back. And my job became essentially traveling all around China, working with different studios and helping them take their games that were made for the Chinese market with Chinese free-to-play economies, and essentially publish them in the West. And this was like 2013, 2014, 2015, a really good time to be doing that, because Facebook as a game platform was really coming together then, and there was just a lot of potential there, and a lot of revenue that those companies ended up getting. And these Chinese studios that I worked for were really, really efficient at acquiring users and at monetizing those users and at retaining those users. So that was great. And essentially that whole time I'm doing a lot of strategy games. Liberators was a game that I was creative director on. We had about 500,000 monthly active users. I think in general, we had like around $2 million in monthly revenue. So it was doing quite well. And I loved strategy games, but I was working more on these free-to-play Facebook games. I was realizing this isn't really right, because we have some users here, because in free-to-play, there's no cap for how much people can spend. So we had some users that were maybe spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a game, on a Facebook game, and they didn't own anything. Like, they didn't have any assets they could keep or trade. They didn't have any say in the game's development. They really didn't have anything. Like the company could, and sometimes did, just shut off the server, and then nothing was left, right? that money was forever gone. That time investment was forever gone. And 2017, I discovered crypto, fell in love with it. I was kind of over my job at the time, so I wanted to start something new. And my co-founder, Nikki, who's still my co-founder to this day, and a huge reason we're still going as a company, he and I had worked together since 2014, and we wanted to make something together. We wanted to start a studio but financing for studios is really difficult. And again, I was looking for a way to really get us up and running, as it's really difficult as a game developer to get going. And yeah, so essentially, as I discovered crypto, I fell in love with it. First, it was, the rabbit hole. I'm sure you've gone through the same thing, where it takes a few weeks to understand really what Bitcoin is and how it works and why it's valuable and
big
why
learning curve. Big learning curve.
Yeah, right. And I think for me, it was really a week or 2 weeks. But then when it hit, it was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is never going away. This is huge. And as soon as I got deeper into that and started learning smart contracts and started learning about ICOs, I could see that in 2017, the ICO wave wasn't really sustainable. So I didn't do any ICO or anything like that, thankfully. But we essentially came with the idea for me, as soon as I understood how smart contracts worked, I was like, gaming and crypto is forever linked. Like, this is forever going to be a thing, because gamers are already used to digital assets and digital ownership and digital value, because they know it, because they have an emotional value to the games they play. Gamers really care about what they do inside of the game. You can see it in the communities, you can see it in the value that certain games attain. And then crypto people essentially need better onboarding and need a better way to reach the masses, and gaming would be it, essentially. So I have a lot of theses on why gaming and crypto are connected, but I'd say those are the two main ones. Is gamers already understand digital scarcity and digital value, and crypto people handle financial markets the same way gamers handle games, essentially. So it was just perfect. And in 2018, we had the idea for BLOCKLORDS. I don't know if the name or the game concept came first. I think probably it was the name. But it's one of those things where, like, once we understood the name BLOCKLORDS, it was just so epic. It sounded so right. It was blockchain, but it could also be something else. So it didn't have to be like in your face blockchain. Like, if you call something crypto pandas or something like that, it's a little more in your face. But BLOCKLORDS could be anything. Yeah, exactly. And yes, essentially then we started the company, and that's a long journey too inside of the company, but that's essentially what led us to do BLOCKLORDS.
I love that. What an intro. Just want to take a quick step back, and again, we will jump right into BLOCKLORDS, but you were talking about the free-to-play boom. I remember this. I was too young. I'm a 95. I just turned 29. I was too young at the time. When free-to-play popped off, I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. You're still a kid. You think you know a lot, but you really don't know shit about shit. Yeah. And a couple of the first games that really boomed were like Farmville. And again, if you were on Facebook, of course, you remember Farmville. Like, every single kid at school, every single person on my hockey team, all the hockey teams that we played, everyone was buzzing on Farmville. And, the rich kids would grab daddy's credit card and have the sickest farms because they could buy cool shit on Farmville. And that's, looking back at it, you're sort of like, oh, this is the revolution. And then, of course, free to play kicked off, and it's never really left. But it's crazy to just think. Very, very nostalgic, you bringing that up. I remember, playing hockey and having an early practice, or waking up in the morning, going for a run, and coming back home, and first thing I'd do, before anything else, before responding to friends or anything, it was like jump on Facebook, fire up the laptop, and make sure the farm's buzzing, make sure the crops are all good. So just crazy to think about. And then here we are today. We have incredibly complex, forward-thinking crypto games within, in-game economies and massive communities. It's so cool how it's transformed. But let's jump into BLOCKLORDS here. Give us the origin story. Like, give us sort of the origin story behind the game, the economy, the lore, and everything else. Give us the TLDR, and then we'll keep going and we'll get into some of the fun stuff. Yeah,
so essentially the idea that we had back then is very similar to the idea we have now as the game's launching in I think it's the third iteration now. And essentially the idea was, you have a hero. That hero is on-chain. It's an on-chain asset. You fight for land, you fight for resources, you take over territory, you improve your character. As you take over territory, you can become a lord. And if you're a lord, you actually earn taxes from when people are trading items inside of your city. That was the initial concept. And in many ways, it's still the concept today. So the journey of getting it made is a very long one. But essentially, we had the idea, me and Nikki, we discussed it. I worked it into a white paper. This is like starting to get into the spring 2018. We start shopping it around to investors, but 2018 already the market's crashing. Nobody believed in crypto gaming back then. Like the crypto people didn't believe in it, because now when I talk to crypto people, most of them get it. Like, okay, gaming and crypto is a thing. Like it's gonna keep growing. But back then it was mostly financial people, DeFi people, even though DeFi was still pretty new back then as well. It was mostly like, why this is like a serious financial thing. Like, why do you want to put a game on it? That was a lot of the backlash I was getting. And that was from the crypto people who are supposed to be for innovation, right? And then the gaming people, they were like, what is this? Crypto's a scam, ICOs are a scam. Like, don't talk to me. That was essentially the vibe. So now, 6 years later, or I guess 6 years later now, things are very, very different. But essentially, we're pitching around. We couldn't get an investor. Market was crashing. And the summer of 2018, there was a competition from Neo. I don't know if you know them. They used to be Antshares. They were really hot in 2017, 2016. And they're still around. But in 2018, they were having a competition for like best blockchain game. And so they were in Shanghai. We were based in Shanghai. We'd actually met the team a few times. So I felt very confident, okay, this is a competition that we can actually win. And we got together a small team. So it was me, it was Nikki, it was our art director, Eric, who's still with us. It was our QA guy, Miawu, who's still with us, and a couple more people who aren't with us anymore. And we put together a demo, we put together a whole business plan, we put together a website. We basically pre-made the whole game, and we developed over the summer. And yeah, in August 2018, we actually won. We didn't win the best game competition, but we won the best blockchain game competition. And that was $80,000. So we won $80,000. So it's not a ton of money to make a game, but it was huge for us back then. We were 5 people, 6 people. And so that was essentially our seed funding, was this grant that we got from Neo. We got to work and we started building, and we built on Neo, and that was really difficult. I don't know if you're familiar with that chain. It's all UTXO based. It was really difficult to work with, but still we made it happen. So we were like one of the only NFT projects to ever launch on Neo. At the same time, funds were running tight. 80,000 sounds like a lot of money, but when you have 6 mouths to feed and 6 months to a year go by, it does get tight. Even though, we made it work. Like me and Nikki, we had $1,000 of salary monthly, for a long time. For like a lot of the time I'm about to talk about, we were only taking out $1,000 a month. And that's essentially how we kept the company alive. But yeah, essentially we deployed on Neo. Then we were out of money. Then we won a contest with Tron, because Tron, which is another Chinese blockchain, they had a competition, and we won $30,000 from them. So we launched on Tron, and that did pretty well. Again, there's no token back then, so it's just a game with on-chain elements, right? And with on-chain heroes. And we launched on Tron, and that did quite well. And what we noticed right away from launching blockchain games was it was easy to get users that were very dedicated and that would spend quite a lot on their game experience. Our average return per active user would be maybe like 300, 400, upwards of $1,000 sometimes per user, which is crazy, right? But the problem was getting new users was almost impossible. Like performance ad didn't work. Everything was on chain back then. So we've learned a lot over the years, but back then we were still pretty diehard of like, everything should be on chain. And we've definitely pivoted since then because we wanted to offer a more scalable and better user experience. But yeah, essentially 2018, 2019 is all about building different first versions of BLOCKLORDS that were entirely on chain. And we launched a version on Tron. We launched a version on Neo, on Matic. We were on Icon as well, which is a Korean chain. So yeah, it was really a learning curve of like, what does it take to build a blockchain game? And back then, even more so than now, it was just very, very difficult. Anything from testnets going down on us the day before launch, because there was just no stability in testnet environments, nodes not syncing at all, bad user experience, the wallets losing tons of users whenever you ask them to install a wallet. 2018, 2019 is when we figure a lot of that out. And it was quite hard. But then basically 2020, what happened is DeFi summer happens. Our team's pretty much struggling because we're living off these grants, but it's really rough going. And the deeper you get into the bear market, the harder it is to get grants, right? So we're definitely like starting to struggle in 2020. We're still shipping good products. We're still shipping quickly, and we're learning a lot about cross-chain development. And basically what happened in 2020 is we started getting a lot of requests and demands like, you guys know a lot about blockchain gaming, NFTs are getting hot. Like, why don't you help us make our game? Because you guys have been doing game for a while now. And that's actually when the idea for Seascape came about in early 2020. The idea was, here we have 2 years of pretty extensive knowledge in blockchain gaming, which nobody else has been working on, right? Because there were very few teams at the time. And we can help other game devs not have to go through what we went through for the last 2 years. And so the idea was, let's create a tech solution, a platform for game developers to not have to deal with all the problems we dealt with. So essentially, let's build a tech solution for NFT and DeFi gaming. So that's the Seascape network. We launched in 2021 and we raised $500,000. Binance was the lead investor for that. So that went pretty crazy. And with Seascape, we essentially helped other studios launch their games, and we helped launch a number of games. And yeah, and 2021 was a crazy year, as you know. So we got a lot of experience. We had over 1 million NFTs minted on different blockchains. We were pretty big in the BNB ecosystem, pretty big in the Moonriver and Moonbeam ecosystem. And the core philosophy was always the same. Like, let's make cross-chain gaming more scalable and more accessible to more users, right? And with that being said, because it is a long story, essentially in 2021, late 2021, everybody was asking us, oh, what happened to BLOCKLORDS? Guys, like, oh, BLOCKLORDS was such a cool idea, like you should bring it back. And, after the 50th time I'd heard that, because Seascape had done quite well, we decided, and we kind of came to the realization, right? Like, we have tech, like we have scalable infrastructure, but the games we're working on that we're helping develop, they're not really at the level that's going to bring in a mass adoption. Because as cool as the tech is, just tech itself is not going to drive users. You really do need the products that are going to drive the users.
Gaming has to be fun. That's one point of Web3 gaming I find that is often overlooked, where it's like, oh, the tech is great, the airdrops are great, the in-game economies and unit economics are great, the community's great, but it's like, if the game's not fun, like that's why you game. You game to pass time and to escape from life, to have fun. So anyway, continue.
No, exactly. And that was the motto for Metaking Studios, fun conquers all. That's always been our motto. So definitely fun's important, and appeal and visuals are important. Some people say, oh, graphics don't matter. I think they do matter, because that's kind of the sign of quality of a project, and that you've really invested in your project, is that it looks good. And long story short, we put together a new studio. We put together a content team. We started working on the new BLOCKLORDS, and Seascape essentially incubated the Metaking Studios and BLOCKLORDS project. And then what ended up happening is investors really went crazy for it. And we started talking to investors, early 2022. The goal was maybe to raise $3-4 million, keep the game fairly modest, but still, better than previous version. And what ended up happening is we got a lot of really great investors, Makers Fund, Bitcraft, Animoca. We got Spartan Group. We got really over 60 investors. So I'm definitely forgetting people, but a really great team of investors and supporters and backers who helped us raise $15 million essentially, which even by the standards of 2022 was a pretty good amount to raise. And essentially we got to work. And for the last 2 years, we've been building this new version of BLOCKLORDS, which is everything we wanted to do before, but in a much higher and more polished and more detailed wrap, essentially.
I love that. David, you are on an absolute roll right now. We do need to take a quick break and give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. That is PrimeXBT. When we get back, we're going to keep buzzing on BLOCKLORDS. And we got to get into the very successful airdrop that you guys did and are still doing. And of course, got to keep going on user acquisition for Web3 gaming, because that is something that you and the team know how to do. And that is a little bit of secret sauce that everyone would love to know. One of the most difficult parts of Web3 gaming, and you guys have pretty much figured that out. Until then, huge shout out to PrimeXBT, longtime friends of CryptoNews.com and longtime friends of the Crypto News podcast. We love PrimeXBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style and to take advantage of the innovative products and professional trading conditions that PrimeXBT is always offering to their customers. PrimeXBT is also running an exclusive promotion for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with David. Before we get into the airdrop, I'd love if you could just buzz on user acquisition a little bit more. You talked about how you guys had perhaps not an LTV, but we'll call it a lifetime value of $300 per customer, which is just absurdly high for gaming. That is absolute bonkers, especially when you have such a delta between the free to play users who never spend a dime and then the whales who spend a lot. But having 300 LTV is insane, and I mean that'll definitely get you in the Hall of Fame. The issue, though, is acquiring new customers. It's super hard. You talked about how ads don't work. A lot of platforms won't let you on. It's difficult to advertise on Facebook, YouTube, Google, you name it, because we're in crypto and they don't want crypto ads on their platform. They find it greasy because of the dozens, if not hundreds of games that have done rug pulls. I get it. I totally empathize with them. I'd love if you could give us the secret sauce on how to acquire users for Web3 gaming. And perhaps if you could also tie in some of the learnings that you've had from back in the day acquiring users to present day acquiring users, where you guys definitely have no trouble of acquiring users today.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we have no trouble acquiring users, because at the end of the day, I compare myself to the Web2 games, right? And there, you want to get the DAUs that are in the hundreds of thousands and millions, for total users. But yeah, a lot has changed since 2019 when we started, right? So back then, we would have a total of 300 to 500 users on a Tron version, something like that. I think we ended up having over 1,000 on Tron, and they would maybe only a few dozens are daily active ones, right? So very different vibe from now. And what we've seen is, first off, the ad platforms have opened up. So now it is possible to do ads on Meta as a blockchain game. Twitter has opened up a bit, quite a lot. They've opened up a little bit as well since Elon bought it. So that's definitely improved a bit. You're also starting to see way more sophisticated tracking tools, where people are able to track people's wallets and connect them with their socials. So there's a lot of experimentation being done there of like, how do you target actually the Web3 users that have been quite active in the past, right? And there's different ways to do that. You can do that. We've done a number of NFT campaigns as well, where we've targeted certain communities, and we've given people free hero NFTs for being part of a certain community or for having certain assets in their wallet. So I'd say Web3 user acquisition has matured quite a lot, and there's still a lot of work to do, but it's definitely gotten better. I'd say the main thing that most people in Web3 do know is that community is a huge part of user acquisition. So having a good, healthy dialogue with your community is very important, and that's really hard, but that's something I urge all Web3 founders to go through and really is to continue updating the community. There's always things that people are going to be unhappy about. So that's also a thing, is like not take everything too personally, but it is very important to put a lot of focus and to share updates, news, and reasonings with your community so that they can see how hard it is to build the game, right? And that was a big thing for us. I think before, I was always, let's wait until this is ready before we share anything about it. Or like, let's wait until the game is perfect before we share it with the community. That's how we used to do it before. But now with the new iteration of BLOCKLORDS, we've been pretty adamant about getting the game out early, even if it's been a bit more buggy, even if it's caused some frustration. At least it's been very clear in showing, okay, this is the game we're working on. And it's been giving users a voice in how we improve the game, right? Because we can tell right away from the data and from the chatter in the community, this is a feature people like, and this is a feature people don't like, or this is a feature people are willing to spend money on, or this is a feature nobody wants to spend money on, right? And where it gets pretty interesting is that very often the data contradicts the community, right? So like the community will say one thing and they'll love one thing or they'll hate one thing. And then you look at the data and it's completely the opposite. And that creates some tricky situations. But yeah, I would say that is the vertical that really Web3 has an edge over Web2 really, is the community is an integral part of your user acquisition and your user retention. So you need to put a lot of focus on that. In terms of ads, what we've seen is it's much easier to get ads now, and it's much easier to reach more users with the ads, which is great. And I definitely think our brand potential has grown with the ads. But as a Web3 game, still essentially trying to reach the standards of Web2 usability, it's a bit harder to retain the users. And I think something we've seen in Web2 games as well is that the ad system is essentially broken, right? There's a lot of publishers spending a lot of money on ads, and it's not really working out. So I think the whole ad model for user acquisition is kind of being revamped. And I think the way it's being revamped is with Web3, because what we're seeing with our airdrop, with our season passes, with our NFT rewards is that our retention is actually much higher from that than it is from gameplay, right? And so that's the tricky part, is how do you integrate your gameplay with your Web3 rewards? And sorry, I'm kind of all over the place right now, but those are a lot of the ideas that I have.
This is great. And you just teed me off for the next point we have to get into. You guys just dropped 300,000 LRDS Lords tokens. to more than 60,000 players. I guess you're sort of OG 60,000 who are, active, daily active users, DAUs, moving the needle. What was the reasoning behind this? Why 300,000? Like, why the airdrop? I know airdrops are sexy right now. They're trendy. They're front of mind. Everyone's doing airdrops. I love airdrops. I think they're great. Why wouldn't? It's it's like anything else. It's like when there's a rewards program. No free ads, but like, why do I always fly with Air Canada? Because I get a lot of points with Air Canada and I get good status with Air Canada. So I'm pretty loyal to Air Canada. I'll spend $100 more on a flight than another, Canadian airline, just because Air Canada does the job. And loyalty and rewards and taking care of your customers matter. So walk me through the whole airdrop, sort of I'd love if you could sort of talk about a bit of the back end tech as well. Like, how hard is it to change the smart contract, or what do you guys have to do in order to literally from inception to execution in order to drop it? And why 300,000 LRDS and why 60,000 players? I'd love if you could go through the whole thought process, the whole journey of the airdrop as a whole.
Yeah. So first thing is we're calling it the game drop because that's a very important distinction. I think airdrop, the play to airdrop narrative, it just doesn't sound great. I want to come up with a new term. So game drop was really the one we've landed on to make it a little sexier. Yeah, to clarify a little bit, we do have, we're up to about 70,000 total downloads. Our DAU right now is about 15,000. But the first game drop was actually only to about 2,000, 2,500 users. So for the first game drop, we really wanted to reward the most active and the most loyal long-term players, right? And so in order to do that, because what's happened is as we've grown bigger, as we've gotten more traction in the market and more people following us, there's a lot of like essentially bot account or fake players kind of popping up and trying to game the system, right? So with this first game drop, we wanted to be a bit careful and make sure that only people who followed us for a long time or who have really invested a lot of time or a lot of resources in this ecosystem actually got a part of the first game drop. So what we looked at is you needed a minimum of 5 hero NFTs. You needed to have played the game at least once, right? So just NFTs wasn't enough. And then you would get a bonus based on how many farm and house levels you had and how much you played the game and actually expanded your farm in all of the sectors, right? So I would say the reasoning with the first game drop was, let's get the old players who've been playing for a long time rewarded for their gameplay. And let's show also the users that by being loyal to the ecosystem and by having a lot of ownership and assets in the ecosystem, you do get rewarded. Our plan, though, is not to have just one airdrop. That's something that most projects do, is they do one airdrop and then they launch a token and then it's kind of done. We've separated into 5 different game drops. So this was the first game drop, 300,000 tokens dropped. The users have actually already gone into the game and they can use, even they can't claim their tokens on chain, but they can use the token in games. And what's interesting is we've seen over 70% of the LRDS that's been dropped, the Lords tokens that have been dropped, have been actually locked up in influence gaining system, right? So the users can actually use their token and they can now lock them for a certain period of time and get influence. And influence is essentially the resource in the game that gets you resource packs and heroes, and you can vote actually in it on the narrative. So a lot of the narrative for BLOCKLORDS is not yet determined and is now going to be determined by our users based on how much influence they have. And influence is essentially going to be our super resource in the game. And the only way to get it is by locking your LRDS or by spending your LRDS, right? So that's a pretty interesting stat, is that 70% of the LRDS dropped has been locked up. And that's going to be a big factor into the next drop as well. But we are also going to have certain drops that are going to be more accessible and more about getting it to as many players as possible. So we're definitely planning a good mix of rewarding loyal users and rewarding new users as well.
I love that. David, we are getting a little tight for time here. I do need you have to, I can't believe I haven't even asked you this, but give us like the actual game and the gameplay itself. Yeah. Again, when I looked at it, sort of futuristic RuneScape vibes, total strategy, super cool, but like, again, not that easy to explain the game without having visuals, because visuals is such a obviously crucial and key part of the game. But like, explain the game, what it looks like, how you play it, what's the goal, the in-game economy. Give us the secret sauce on that.
So the game is really a hybrid of all my favorite games. So the Total War series, Age of Empires, and games like EVE Online. So what we call it is it's MMO strategy game, which is a fairly new genre. There's been some experimentation with it on mobile, but I'd say for this type of game, we're really going for heavy on the MMO strategy sector. The game features that are live right now are mainly focused on farming and ruling. So I'll talk about the 4 core pillars of gameplay. You start as a farmer. As a farmer, it's all about picking your piece of land, growing it, upgrading your base. It's actually a medieval Farmville is the way you could call it, right? You're upgrading your building, you're collecting resources, you're managing your squads, you're recruiting new squads. Once in a while, a bear shows up, so you have to kill the bear, or a wolf shows up, you have to kill the wolf. But essentially, the early gameplay and what's live now is all about the farming and about getting as many resources as possible. We have 13 different types of resources, I believe. And you can take your resources and you can invest them in new buildings or in recruiting more squads or in getting a stronger farm. Or you can go to marketplace and sell them for gold. And basically gold, you could say, is an intermediary resource in the game that has a lot of uses as well. What's interesting to note is as you're farming, as you're growing your farm, as you're maximizing your resource potential, you're paying taxes. You're paying taxes to your rulers. And your rulers are basically the whales who control the regions where people are farming. And so the rulers, they're fighting to get as many resources as possible in their coffers, which essentially grows their wealth, and they can invest that wealth into building out city buildings. And city buildings are going to improve things in the regions for the players who are there, right? So essentially what we want to create is this competitive gameplay between the whales, the rulers, to fight for as many people in their land as possible to grow the wealth of that region as possible. Kind of like the real world, right? Like you want the most productive region possible in order to get more tax revenue, in order to do more things. And of course, battles are a big part of that. So ruling, I'd say, is half done right now. Farming is getting very close to fully done. And now where we're putting a lot of focus on this year is the fighting, right? So essentially, when the fighting goes live, users who have been farming for a long time will be able to create armies. And with these armies, they can go and raid other neighboring farmers, right, who are in other regions. So you can become Vikings, essentially, right, and steal stuff from the wealthy neighbors, so to say. So as you're stealing resources from others, that's going to bother the lords or the ladies of those regions because they're losing out on tax revenue. If your farmers keep being raided, you're losing out on tax revenue, right? Yeah. And then the idea is those rulers will be able to incentivize with tokens, with resources, with heroes, people to protect the farmers in that region, right? Essentially hiring a police or a national guard force, right, that protect the farmers. And then at the top of the funnel, we're going to have the kingdom wars, where essentially any lord or lady can declare themselves king. They can start conquering. Lords and ladies will now pay taxes to those kings, but of course, other kings will want to attack them. And if you look at EVE Online, where they had hundreds of thousands of dollars in spaceships burned during a battle, destroyed, that's how we see it as well. We're going to have really epic battles. These epics are going to see a lot of chaos and death, but the winners will get the spoils. And that's the idea really of the economy of the game, is to get the big players working together with the small players against each other to conquer the world, right? And that's going to create a lot of fun and a lot of drama and a lot of anger too, I'm sure. But that's how it works. And then on the NFT side, all heroes are NFTs. They now do not have a lifespan. Essentially, every NFT has an age and certain stats and certain traits. But when we activate the dynasty system, heroes will start getting older and dying. And so then it's going to be really important to get married and to have babies and to create dynasties, basically your own family dynasties that are going to have different advantages, different powers. And of course, the more noble and famous your dynasty is, the better it's going to be for your progress in the game. So that's also a very big system that we'll be launching this year.
So cool. It literally, as you're describing that, it literally reminds me of real life. Like that's literally no different than how the world works.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Cool. Last question on sort of the macro outlook and overview of gaming as a whole. Tons of industry layoffs recently at Riot, Epic, Activision, Blizzard, literally to my knowledge, the 3 biggest gaming companies out there. Maybe missing a couple, but I believe those are the biggest 3. Tons of layoffs. What does this mean for the industry? Are these folks going to jump on the Web3 ship? Does that mean more AAA web developers will join blockchain and Web3 gaming? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, we recruit people, essentially all the time, though definitely the last 2 years have been a bit slower than others. But I'll run into maybe 1 out of 4 people I try to poach, recruit that are like, I'll never work for a Web3 game. I definitely think that's dying down. I think free-to-play was the same in the beginning, right? Like, there were a lot of devs that are like, I'm never going to work on a free-to-play game. And now basically every good game is a free-to-play game. So I think a lot of that hate is going to pass. I think there is a brain drain happening from Web 2 to Web 3. I think I was at the Satoshi Roundtable recently, and I was discussing with some people from Manimoka, and the fact is, if you're a talented game dev that wants to start your own studio, you're going to have a lot more chances getting funding as a Web3 project than you are as a Web2 project. And if you're talking about, oh, I'm going to work at a big corporation and, at a big, Activision or something like that, and hope that they're going to finance a new IP, that's just very rare. So I would say just because the capital is much more fluid in Web3, so to say, a lot more stuff is getting funded. And that's for both good and bad, right? Like a lot of bad projects get funded too. And that's not great, but a lot of good ones do get funded. And, I think we would never have gotten the funding we got as a Web2 project. That's just a fact. And the fact that we've been able to create this game, that's, like strategy games don't get a lot of investment generally. They're not seen as like cash cows the same way a FPS game or a battle royale is. So I'd say just because there's more capital, because there's more opportunities, because there's more jobs, it's going to benefit the industry as a whole. And I'd say Web2 or legacy gaming, whatever you want to call it, does have a lot to figure out. And I think Web3 will start kind of taking some of that share over time.
I love it. David, you were incredible today. A phenomenal episode, and can't wait to have you on for round 2. And heck, we barely scratched the surface as well. And at the rate that you guys are growing and shipping, we're going to have you on pretty darn quickly. Thanks for coming on. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and BLOCKLORDS online and on socials?
Yeah, so blocklords.com is really the best place to find BLOCKLORDS the game. You can download it there. You can join our Discord. @BLOCKLORDS is our Twitter on X now. I am on X. I'm Lord of Blocks. I'm not very active, so I suggest you follow BLOCKLORDS instead of my personal account. But yeah, feel free to reach out. We're pretty active on Telegram, on Discord, and on X. So just reach out anytime. We're always open for partnerships. And most importantly, we want more players. So please join our game and join our community.
Love it. Folks, what an episode with David Johansson, CEO, co-founder, and creative director of BLOCKLORDS. What an episode. He was bringing the noise, everything BLOCKLORDS related, blockchain gaming, Web3 gaming, airdrops, user acquisition for Web3 games, and a little bit of macro gaming as a whole. Huge shout out to David and the team for making this happen. To the listeners, love you guys. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking to the team, love you guys. Thank you for everything. Eustace, you're the man. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.